welcome to a new video on Code Tech Tutorials, continuing from last week on GUIs that you can use with your C++ projects. Last week we covered I'm GUI, and you guys seem to like that, so I figured I'd show a couple more that are useful and that you see in the wild a lot. wxWidgets, cross-platform GUI library. I'm going to show you how to get this up and going, give you a quick example, address a few pitfalls that you'll probably run into, and hopefully after watching this video, you'll be able to use wxWidgets just like whippity snip. Okay, let's get started with the stuff. Now, first of all, I just want to point out the source, and it is literally this web page. If you just Google search wxWidgets, you will find it, and there are documentation, tutorials. We're going to be using the Hello World tutorial just to prove that our app works, because once it's up and working and you know the basics, you can take it from there. But there are definitely some pitfalls into getting this actually running. It didn't work for me the first time I tried. I went through the tutorial, put in all the code, had some strange errors, had to do a little research. I'm going to solve all that for you, and we're going to get right into it. We're just going to go and find the Hello World tutorial here. Here we go. It's the very first thing. Now, what this has is a nice explanation of how everything works. And I'm going to briefly go over that, but I would recommend reading this more thoroughly if you're a little confused still. Basically, we want a few main classes. Of course, we need the headers. We'll talk about that. But you need a WX app. You need this class, and you have to override it with your own, like so. So you just publicly inherit from it, and you need to override on init. So that's one class we need. Well, there's one other class we need. So I'm going to just talk about these two first, and that is the WX frame. So you need a WX app and a WX frame. And this particular API, it has the main included, which is a little different from the stuff we usually do here. Usually we write our own main. In this case, what we do is we use the main that they include, and we're going to see a little bit more about that shortly. But basically, you call this macro and you pass it the app that you overrode, which is this one here. And that's somewhat the gist of it. We're going to have some IDs. You can declare an enum like this with more IDs, but there are some built-in ones that they recommend using. And they have some examples of some base cases. For example, on init, you want to initialize a new frame and show it, and then return true. And on the frame, with your frame initialization, you want to initialize the default frame with something like this. They're calling it Hello World here. So initialize the base class, and then you have all this stuff, which is basically all your menus and everything you want to do. They just have some sample cases here. Now, so how does this work when you click on buttons and stuff? Well, it throws events, or throws the wrong word, and basically you bind it to functions, similar to something like a callback. So you set your buttons or menus to functions that you've created. You can put lambdas in here too. But basically, you write these functions in your frame class, generally privately, and you call them. Just like, well, this is to set up the call so that it just automatically happens. So you can see that this is continued from the constructor, and they just have some examples like on exit, they do close true, on about, they do a little message box, on hello, they log a message, which just pops up a thing in your screen. And here's an example of a lambda instead of the function class like we saw in the other one. There's the function pointer and the class. So you can, this captures the class, and it passes an event, and there's what it actually does. So you can do it either way. And here's the entire program. We're going to go ahead and grab all this. We are going to be using Visual Studio 2019 Community Edition, which is free, with a C++ workflow, of course. For this tutorial, you can use pretty much anything you want. As far as editor goes, this one's just nice because it handles a lot of the additional setup for you. And also, we're going to be using cmake, and we're also going to use the native Visual Studio stuff. So stay tuned. We're gonna learn a few tricks that you may not know in addition to just wxWidgets along the way here, and it'll be fun. So let's go ahead and create a new project. And which one do you guys want to see first? Do you want to see cmake or Visual Studio? don't worry, I'll wait. Let's do just an empty Visual Studio project. Empty project, project 1, we're going to call it wx. Tests are definitely a little different. So this default solution gives us nothing. We're just going to add a source file, CP file. You can give it a name if you want. I'm just going to leave it source because it doesn't matter too much. And we're just going to put this into our source. Now, of course, it doesn't see it yet because it doesn't know about wxWidgets. We'll fix that in just a second. But just to summarize the code, because this is probably the last time I'm going to go over it since there's extensive Hello World documentation readily available, and it'll be probably quicker to go through that than to listen to me ramble on about it. So we've got the header, of course. There's our myApp class, which has on init. There's our myFrame class, which has a constructor and some private functions to call for things you click on or things you do. An additional ID, you could put more in here if you want. And there's our main. This is what implements the main. You gotta pass it the app. So you don't write a main, which is going to be a little weird, but they've already written the main. wxWidgets has the main written inside it. You just gotta use this macro to call to it, basically. Okay, and then they just define all these functions. There's the myApp on init. There's the myFrame constructor. As you can see, it sets up all the stuff, then binds the functions. And there's some more definitions on exit, on about, on hello. All right, cool. So let's get wxWidgets set up. We're going to use VC Package Manager in a local solution. So we're going to bring up console. We're going to use Control tilde to bring that up here in Visual Studio. And we're just going to go new -item vcpkg.json. And we're going to use this to get our libraries here. I do have a tutorial on VC Package Manager if you're confused about it. And I've talked about it in a few other videos, including the one preceding this about IMGUI. So if you're a little stuck there, I don't want to get into it again because I've got into it so many times. But basically what we're going to do is we're going to open up this JSON here and tell it what it needs. We're going to use Visual Studio Code for this. Here we have our file, and this of course needs a name. We're just going to call it wxTest for now. It needs a version. We'll just make it 1.0 for now. And it most importantly needs dependencies. And in this case, we just want wxWidgets. You need to check the availability of this. You can open up your terminal, or we already have a terminal open actually here in Visual Studio. So we can just go vcpkg.exe search wxWidgets. You can do this in your normal terminal. So this is a vcpkg thing for library management, and there you can see it, and there's this exact name. So that's what we would use here, in case you're not entirely sure. Oops, I just pasted the wrong thing. Okay, so there we go. This looks good. We can close that. And now, when we go to build this, it's going to go grab all those libraries, which we will see. So let's go ahead and hit build. Well, it failed. It doesn't understand something. Oh, there's one step first. The properties of this project, we need to tell it to use a vcpkg manifest. Very important. So you just go to your project, right click on it, go to properties, or you can go to edit properties. That works too. And under these, you'll find this vcpkg, and you can set use vcpkg manifest to yes, and that's it. Now it will actually use that manifest that we just wrote. And now when we go to build it, something magical will happen. It's going to detect what we're compiling for here, and it's going to go ahead and grab all the libraries it needs. Mainly it's wxWidgets, but that needs a few other things like these libs, libjpeg, tiff, zlib, a few other required things. So it's going to get everything you need all in one go. And it tells us if we're using cmake what to do. We'll use that later. We're not using cmake. It's just going to automatically work because we're on Visual Studio and it's designed to do that. So now when we go back over to our source here, it's still got squigglies, but it probably just hasn't updated yet. Let's go ahead and build this solution. And we get a 1 failed. This is expected, and this is one of the pitfalls I wanted to address. This here says that it cannot invoke the main. Now, if we look into this, we'll find out that this function, wxImplementApp, is looking for WinMain on Windows, and that's basically the native Windows window. So it's trying to launch a Windows app, except we have this program by default set to console. So we need to set it to a window. And to do that, you go back to the properties, same way, and we go to the linker and system, and look at this subsystem here. Before you change this, check your configuration and your platforms, because it only changes it for the ones you set. And that's one thing people say, like, it works in debug but not release, and it's probably because you have it configured for debug but not release, or something like that. So you can just set it to all configs, all platforms, to make sure all of them update, in this case here. And now we want to change the subsystem to Windows. Hit apply, OK. And now it should be a whole lot happier. Let's go ahead and build this one more time. And let's go ahead and hit play. Very good. There's our hello world as we specified with that code. And you can click the buttons to run the functions that we had there. Very good. So there you go. That's how you do it with just standard Visual Studio. Now, let's do it with cmake. So we're going to exit. Actually, let's go just new project, cmake project, and we'll just use the default wx test. Wait, I did this backwards. I called the Visual Studio one cmake. That's going to be confusing. I'm just going to call this cmake real. Yeah, that's fine. Okay, so we get some base stuff. I just left everything default here. It gives us a top level cmake that does add subdirectory to the project here. So let's go into this one. You see the add executable. Now we can put that code in here again. Let's see if I still have it on my clipboard. I do. Perfect. So I just put that code in the CPP. We are not going to need this .h, so we're actually going to delete it. But we need to make sure we go to the cmake and get rid of the header here. And we're going to try to do this, and I'm going to address all the problems that come up and teach you all the stuff. First of all, we're going to add that JSON file to grab the library. So I just went to the top level, did new file. We're going to give it the same name as before, JSON. This time we can open it right here. And we're going to do essentially about the same thing. I'm not going to worry about this. I'm just going to type stuff. For some of these, I guess I could give it a better name. wx test 2, sure. Version, another 1.0. Make sure you have quotations, do the JSON thing. And last but not least, dependencies. Dependencies. Spell that right? I think so. No. All right. So we want the same thing. wxWidgets. And there we go. Now, I will admit this one was a little bit more troublesome, but I'll address everything I can and show you what I learned and how to get it actually running, because this one doesn't run quite as easily. So now that we've got that in here, we want to do a generate. Now, if you've already generated and you have an out folder over here, you need to delete that out folder after making this VC-PKG JSON. So just know that you need to delete the out folder if you have one. Now we're going to hit generate, let it do its thing. It's going to have an error. And what is this error? I spelled dependencies wrong. I knew it. I knew something seemed off about that. Oh, there's another N in there. Native English speaker here doesn't know English. Isn't it funny that people that are not native English speakers opt to write on forums, please excuse my bad English, then they continue to write perfect English, and you're like, what do you mean? Mine's worse than yours. Not an original thought. I read someone comment that somewhere, and I thought it was accurate. All right, very good. So this is still generating, doing its thing. It goes ahead and gets all the libraries just like it did before. This time we are going to use the cmake stuff. So what I'm doing to select these, because if you don't want this stuff on the side, is you click over on the left side, then you hold Alt and left shift, and then you can start selecting and do like a box select, Alt left shift. But you got to click and put your cursor at the starting point, and then you can copy the entire block. Control C. So we're going to put this in our cmake that has the executable, and we'll just put it right below it. And we can get rid of all this other stuff. It doesn't matter. We don't need it. Now it's going to want to generate again since we changed to cmake. Go ahead and do it. It should only take a second. It's already got the libraries. So now it did have another error, and that's because when we did this copy paste, our executable name here is wx test cmake real. Over here we have the word main, so we just need to actually have the same thing. Okay, now it should be happy. Is it going to work the first time? You'll have to just keep watching and see. Okay, cmake generation finished. It was successful. Now to build this, we can just go build all, and it has an error. Now this is the same error as before, unresolved main. It's because, once again, in this code, where we're calling this main, it's having trouble. It's basically trying to launch a console app when we need it to be a Windows app. And this is something you adjust in cmake. So we'll go back to our cmake here, and where we have add executable, after the executable name, but before all the sources, we want to put win32. If you're using Mac, I believe there's Mac, it's like Mac OS subsystem or something. There's a Mac version, basically. So it is cross-platform, but win32, since we're on Windows, and this is going to tell it that it's not a console app, but it's a native Windows app, and that we should be launching a native window instead of a console. And that's just what wxWidgets wants. So now we'll regenerate here since we changed our cmake, and then we'll try to build again. And this time our build is successful. Awesome. So let's launch our piece of software here. It has a default startup item of the one we just built, and that's fine. It's essentially the same as going to your build and launching your executable down in there. This just makes it so that it's a button here. But when we hit play, it says it can't find some DLLs. Oh no, what gives? All right, now I think this is actually a problem with, I'm not sure what is the problem with, but this is an error somewhere. Someone needs to update something, because we're in debug mode. We've told it to launch a debug. We built for debug, but the library it's trying to use is the release version. Why? I don't know. There's probably something we can adjust to custom change that. And just to prove this further, we're going to go to this alt where we have all the libraries built from that vcpkg JSON installed somewhere in here, x64 Windows. There's some libs there. Let's go into bin, and we'll see a bunch of DLLs, including the ones we're looking for. But this is the problem here. These are release versions, and when we're in debug, we should be, it's probably going into here. It's looking in this folder for the release ones. So someone's got a config wrong somewhere. The release ones are clearly not in here. So there's probably a solution to that. If you know it, leave a comment down below. Or if you know the place to report this particular error, let me know or report it, that's fine. But the quick solution is to just build it in release. You could manually correct the library paths, but they should be automatic. Like I said, there's just a bug. Okay, so we're gonna go up here where it says x64 debug and go to manage configurations. And we're just gonna add a new one with this plus button. And we're gonna choose x64 release. We're gonna leave everything default, just save it and close it. And now we're going to switch this to x64 release and generate. It's probably going to grab libraries for all the release versions. So it's going to do the whole download thing again. Okay, generation has completed for the x64 release. We can now go back to our startup item and choose it. It should build if it needs to build. Looks like a build started. And it succeeds and links the proper libraries. So there you can see it works fine and release with cmake, and I'm sure it would work fine in debug as well if they just if they would just manage to link the right versions. Where is this? Yeah, there's just something configured wrong where they're generating the wrong libraries. But yeah, the debug one should use this UD one. That's my analysis of the problem. I'm not sure if that's 100% correct, but it's pretty telling. When you launch the thing, let's try this for the third time. Oh, it wants to generate before it lets me choose a startup item. Fine. Okay. It's pretty telling that when we launch and debug, it says it can't find, you see the UD, or the U there, it's just the standard one. The one that has D after that U, it's very subtle, is for the debug one. That's my analysis of the problem. So, yeah. You just have to build and release for now, unless you can further figure out that problem with cmake. But there you go. That's how you do it with cmake. So I've showed how to do it with both just standard Visual Studio projects and cmake while using vcpkg.json. You should now be able to write your app as you want. Basically, all you do is you design these two classes as your program wants. And now as the final thing, I just want to show an example of an app that uses wxWidgets pretty exclusively. Audacity. You've probably seen Audacity. This is using wxWidgets. So you'll see it all over the place. All right. Well, I might cover a third one next week. Let me know what you guys think. I appreciate all the support. Thank you guys who have supported in any way, via a watch, a like, becoming a patron, which update time. I've changed the Patreon once again. It is now, there's just one tier. So if you want to support, you just go over there and support the one tier. It's $3, essentially the price of a beer or a coffee. So if you want to throw me one of those and help me keep generating this kind of content for you guys, that would help a lot. Also, the join button here on YouTube only has one tier. It's the same price, it's essentially the same thing. Just wanted to give options on both in case you don't want to go make an account over there or something. All right, appreciate it, guys. Catch you in the next one. Peace.